I feel like I'm gonna be sick.
This video already has millions of views, and if you want to know why, listen to what he says next. It's truly unbelievable.
I just looked through my Walmart history and I found this Walmart order from 2 years ago for the whole month worth of groceries. 45 items cost $126. A whole month of groceries just for me, basically. But I did notice this reorder all button and I wanted to see how much it would cost now. Now, this order of 45 items for 1 month would have cost $414. That is 4 times more.
Seeing the numbers laid out like that truly makes me feel sick to my stomach as well. And this leads me to what I believe is the largest issue facing small and medium-sized businesses, and I want to share what that is and what I believe you can do about it. This problem is so pervasive that it affects every single person in the country, arguably the world, but I would say that it affects businesses even more so because of the way they're structured. We've all felt the difference in cost of every single item over the past 4 years. And I want to show you exactly what I believe has happened and why I think it's so important more than ever for business owners and everyone actually to focus on this issue. As I've seen prices just skyrocket, I started to get really obsessed with trying to understand economics in a different way. And I think I've come to some interesting realizations. Now, I'm not saying I'm some economist and some super expert, but I think there's some pretty simple but logical examples here that I'm going to go through that every single person can understand and understand why we're at a different place than we've ever been before. Now, before we get into this, I want a full disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. I am not an economist. This is my own beliefs based on the research I've done. But what I started to see happening and prices rising so dramatically over the past 4 years, it got my wheels turning and trying to understand the economy in a way I haven't before. Because I think it's extremely important, especially as a business owner, that I understand these things, because the reality is, if we are losing our purchasing power at a rate that's unprecedented, and it will continue to be that way, I think, as a business owner, you'd have to grow the business so substantially every year to even keep up with that pace. And that pace has reached a point that is truly unsustainable. And I want to show you why I believe that happened and also what we can do about it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the M1 money supply. This is literally something I never learned about in school, didn't even know what it was until I started getting into this a couple of years back. And it's essentially the amount of money in circulation. And what happens is when our Federal Reserve prints more money, it doesn't really increase the value of the money. It just does it in a superficial way. Because if you have a pizza and you cut it into more and more slices, you can't feed more people. Right? That's just not how it works. But that's essentially what's happening here. Now, the thing is, there's a lag on this. So initially, when you print more money, it has this initial effect of all assets rising in price. Things look amazing. For example, you saw the price of real estate go through the roof right after 2020 and beyond when this money was printed and went into circulation. You even went to the crazy things like used cars. Like there was a point in time when I could have sold my used car, which was about 1.5 years old, for almost as much as I bought it for, sometimes more than I bought it for. That doesn't make any sense, right? That should not exist in that way. And let's look at the actual math of how much was printed over about the past 50 years. It's the increase of the US of the M1 money supply. Just look at the chart here, right? We don't need to be a fancy economist to look at what happened right around 2020 and how much money was put into circulation. That's literally why we got this massive rise in asset value. But on the flip side, there was a major challenge here, which it has now reduced the purchasing power of every single dollar and caused more inflation, right? That's my basic understanding of it. Obviously, there's way more that goes into it. I'm just using it at a very high level that I think we can hopefully all understand. And of course, you'll kill me in the comments if you don't think that that's right. But let's go a little bit deeper here. If we lay these two charts on top of each other, it would be pretty clear that the increase in the M1 money supply increases inflation, right? Which is all what I just talked about. And look at what has happened with inflation. Now, they're going to tell you in this example, it's 8.3%, but we know that that's not the case, right? As real people that buy real things every single day, they mess with that number. I don't want to get into politics here, but they remove things from that number and mess with the math to make it seem like it's not as bad as it is. And you could argue if that's the right thing or wrong thing to do, right, all day long. I'm not going to get into that. But let's just look at actual math, right? Look at what has happened. Here's a great post on Reddit showing prices from 2022 versus 2024 on a variety of items. You can see what the increases are actually like. This is not 8%. It's not even 8% a year over 4 years. It's well beyond that. We're talking about some of these things nearly 100% up. Some things are up more than 100% in this time period. So what they're showing is not actually accurate. Now, when you have inflation at this rate, the scary part is we are losing 50% of our purchasing power, if things stayed the same, every 7 years. So as a business owner, if you have $1 million in the bank, and you don't touch that at all, or invest it. In 7 years, the purchasing power will be that of 500,000. If that doesn't scare every business and every person in the country, I don't know what will, right? That's a huge, huge problem. So as I'm going through this and learning it, the question that's coming to my mind is, well, what am I going to do? I have to either grow my business by at least 15 to 20% a year, right? Compounded every single year to be ahead, or I have to figure out a different strategy. What do I do with the cash that's in my account that isn't going to be used for any particular operating expense, right? It's cash we've accumulated, it's profit essentially sitting there. What do you do with that? If you know you're going to lose 50% of the value over 7 years, and even if that's off by a little bit, there's a major issue here. So now as a business owner, it's reaching to a point where we have to think about beyond our business and in terms of the actual money that's sitting there. Obviously, big companies do this all the time, right? Apple and these giant companies are maneuvering things, there's stock buybacks, they're doing all sorts of fancy things, holding different real estate, holding money overseas, holding T-bills, whatever they're trying to do. They have like a financial strategy with just their assets. And small and medium-sized businesses, obviously we don't have a fraction of what Apple has, right? We get that. But we still hopefully have some amount of money sitting there that is being diluted in value. So what do you do about that? I went through every single investment I could possibly go through and started to look at the type of returns, the type of appreciation, what's been historical, what do I believe will take place in the future. And obviously this is just based on projections, beliefs, and research. And I'm just some guy, so obviously I could be way off. And I couldn't come up with much, right? I used to own a number of properties and real estate, and I thought that was a good investment, which obviously when the prices went through the roof, it seemed like it was. But now looking at it with very high interest rates, or arguably high interest rates, I don't see that as a long-term strategy, at least for me, right? That's not a strategy that I want to deploy any longer. So it's leaving me with a limited number of options. And this may sound ridiculous to some, to others this is going to make total sense, but I truly believe there's an asset that everyone's overlooking, or most people are overlooking. It's not in the common ethos that not only has beaten inflation, it has crushed it. Not only has beaten every other asset on the market by a landslide, it continues to do so in a long enough time horizon. And that asset is called Bitcoin. And again, some people are going to say this is extremely risky, it makes no sense. Just do me a favor and listen to me for a few minutes and do your own research. I would never ask anybody to invest a penny. I'm not a financial advisor. All I would ask someone to do is do your own research. If you spend 10 to 15 hours at least researching this, I believe you'll come to the same conclusion that I have, which is this is potentially one of the only assets that you can purchase that has the best chance for a store of value over a long period of time. The only one besides that I've come up with through various research is beachfront property, but there's a number of challenges there, including the risk that the ocean takes it back or that the rules change, etc. Because that's very scarce, right? You can't make more of beachfront property. Every other asset, they can always make more stock at any company, right? Real estate, there's tons of land in the country. Of course, the land that is in areas in terms of cities that are very, very valuable, right? That will most likely go up as well, right? But you also don't know what's going to happen to those cities over time. There's been plenty of places that were the epicenter of a country that are now ghost towns, right? It's happened throughout history. So there's a level of risk there too. Now in this video, I'm not going to get into the technical nature of Bitcoin. There's a million videos that will explain this way better than I ever could. I just want to look at the big picture and hopefully start to get people's wheels turning, that they're going to do their own research and dive into this, because I think this is critically important and I want to add value to every single business owner out there. That's my mission. Let's look at the top assets by market cap, right? Let's look at this right here. So gold is number one on this particular chart with over $15 trillion in gold. 15 trillion. Then you've got Microsoft, massive companies, Apple, Nvidia, Alphabet, Amazon, silver, Meta Platforms, and look at what number 10 is on the list. People that try to say Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme, it's tulip mania. I'm sorry, but tulips never became the 10th largest asset by market cap in the entire world. It wasn't even close. If you would put all of your stereotypes aside or preconceived notions and just say, hey, there's an asset that's the 10th largest in the entire world that has statistically outperformed almost every other asset that exists over this 13 plus year period, you might be interested in knowing what that is. But because of a lot of talking heads and BS that has taken place, and of course some very bad actors in the space that have caused a ton of harm, right? No one can deny that. It makes people feel a certain way, which is understandable. So take a look at how big this market cap is. We're talking about $1.2 trillion in here at this point. Publicly traded companies are now purchasing Bitcoin as cash reserves, MicroStrategy being probably the largest holder at this point. This is becoming a strategy that's being used by some very high level companies. So I think it's something that's probably worth looking into. And let's compare it versus other assets, other stores of value. For example, someone might buy the Dow Jones index. So let's look at Bitcoin compared to some other assets over a long enough time horizon to get an idea of where we're at. Dow Jones over 5 years, up 47%, Bitcoin up 441%. You can compare that to anything on this list, right? Gold over 5 years, 65%, S&P over 5 years, I think it's been the best, 85%, still not even a quarter of Bitcoin's price increase on a long enough time horizon. If you can start to play around with these max numbers, it's almost ridiculous to even do, because gold, even tracking from, I guess they started tracking 2012, the index, it's up 34%. We aren't even going to click Bitcoins. I'll show you for a second, but it doesn't even make sense because it wasn't an asset that was worth investing in. Obviously, it was worth investing in hindsight, but I think the level of risk, 13 years ago was so high. The only people who were there were extremely into this stuff and arguably lucky that they were there so early. So I don't think any companies would have been comfortable really buying or holding their cash reserves in Bitcoin back in 2015 or earlier. So I get that. So let's not even look at that or make that argument. Now, one of the biggest arguments is that Bitcoin is extremely volatile, which makes it risky. But there's a huge difference between volatility and risk. And every financial advisor will explain that. They not necessarily recommend Bitcoin, but they will explain there's a difference between volatility and risk. Now, if you need money next month, arguably even next year on a short time horizon, Bitcoin's not a good store of value, I don't believe, because it is very volatile. And I'll show you an example of that will illustrate this in a big way. This shows you the extreme volatility of Bitcoin, especially on a short time horizon. Right? If you look back from January 2012, 738 went down to 380. That's a 49% loss. It's massive, right? Then if you look at here, 16 down to 7, you went here, you can see all these. Some of these are absolutely gigantic. For example, in November 30th, 2013, from 1163 all the way down to 152 at the bottom, and that correction lasted 411 days, so well over a year. But again, if you never sold it, even if you bought it at 1163, right, on a long enough time horizon, over a 10-year span to 2023-ish, right, even 2024, your 1,000 is now $60,000 a coin. It's almost a 60x or a 55x, whatever it comes to. So on a long time horizon, I do not believe there is a high level of risk with this asset. On a short, absolutely. Right, absolutely. Nobody can argue that. There was even a massive crash that everybody knows about, or most people started hearing about Bitcoin when it went from 19, nearly 20,000 down to under 6. It actually went to about 3,000 at the very bottom of this. But again, on a long enough time horizon, Bitcoin today is sitting at nearly $61,000, right? That's today. I hope this information's been valuable for you and your wheels are turning and you're thinking, hey, this is worth the amount of time it will take to investigate this further. Right? Most people spend 40 to 50,000 hours of their life working. It's probably worth spending 100 hours to learn how to preserve that wealth. You won't even need 100 hours to fully, I think, understand why Bitcoin is so important to our generation and every generation that ever existed, and why it's an asset that's worth considering to preserve value long term. Another big thing is that as Americans, sometimes we take for granted, I know I do, that we can trust more or less the banks. Right? Sure, they've made huge mistakes in the past, but we trust that when we go there, our money will be there. We also understand that since we have the global reserve currency, that we probably won't be hyperinflated. Now, things might change now because of what has happened, but there's plenty of countries where hyperinflation has taken place and everything's basically gone to zero, right? The value of their money has gone to zero. So if you live in a place where 2 billion people live that are unbanked or don't have access to trustworthy banking institutions, that's a major challenge for the global economy. Now these people have the ability, as long as they have an internet connection, to have basically their own bank in cyberspace where they can store wealth and store value. That's a huge deal. Even if you lived in a war-torn country, God forbid, where you had tens of millions of dollars of real estate and now it's being invaded, well, you can't just take your real estate with you. So everything you've worked for could be gone, right? That's so scary. Now you have the ability to store that value and move it with you. It's also decentralized, which is really interesting, where this network is running on computers all over the world, right? Not one country or one entity controls this asset, which is really cool. So I definitely recommend looking into it deeper. I think there's a scarcity asset. There'll only ever be 21 million coins. You can look more into that and what that means and how they're produced. It's very interesting technology, and there's probably no surprise that there should be some type of digital property that has been invented. Our whole world is digital at this point. It's surprising it even took this long for this to exist. Everything is digital. All the money in your bank account is digital, right? Every single dollar, more or less. The bank holds almost nothing in the actual bank. So you can't even think of it as those dollars. It's just numbers on a screen, right? Everything's digital. So spend, please, all I ask is just my recommendation, right? Just spend some time researching this. We all are going to work for 40 to 50,000 hours typically over the course of our lifetime, generating money, generating wealth. Why not spend 100 hours trying to preserve that wealth? I don't even think you'll need 100 hours of research to come to the same realization I did. So I know it might be a monumental shift mentally, but just spend the time and energy to do the research. I truly believe it'll be worth your time. Hopefully you liked this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.